Hello, and welcome to Eppendorf Lab Channel, your home for experts and knowledge live. I'm Matthew Yurkevich, a marketing manager for Eppendorf SE, and your moderator today. We're all very excited to have you here, joining us for a slightly different webinar than we normally run. Today, we will be speaking with a lab manager from a life science tech company who will share his view on digitalization efforts in the modern biotech sector, including his experiences and best practices on how to implement smart software tools in a molecular biology lab. I'm happy to welcome our expert guest, Francesco Nicolini, Senior Operations Manager at Synthase. Synthase is a digital experiment platform built for high-performance life science R&D teams to help them run more powerful experiments and accelerate scientific progress. Welcome to Eppendorf Lab Channel, Francesco.
Hey, Matthew. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Joining Francesco in conversation is Tobias Wingbermüller, the co-founder and chief commercial officer of Cluster Market, the world-leading lab equipment scheduling and management software. Welcome back, Tobias.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me.
And rounding out the discussion is Thomas Shackle, product manager for digital solutions and Visionize Lab Suite at Eppendorf SE. Hello, Thomas.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Now, before they get started, I want to take a moment to direct your attention to the interactive portion. If you look directly below the video frame, you will see a simple form for submitting questions for the experts. We will try to answer as many live as time allows, but any questions we miss will be addressed via email after the webinar. Before the question submission, you will find links to all the solutions highlighted today: Synthase, Cluster Market, and Visionize Lab Suite. Be sure to contact us or our experts for any more information on demos and trials. Now, without further ado, let's get this conversation rolling on digitalization in the lab. Thomas, I believe you had mentioned before you were curious about Francesco's experiences and lab operations.
That's right, I really am. So, once again, thanks Francesco and Toby for jumping in for us. So, just a second. Always the fun with working in a big lab. I'll be back in a second.
While Thomas is getting started, Francesco, could you just describe your overall lab setting and like the main use cases you deal with at Synthase?
Yeah, sure. So like you mentioned, we have built a digital experiment platform. And in order to achieve this, we have a lab that we use to run some proof of concept work and upstream experiments, as well as internal testing and QA work. Our setup consists of 4 rooms. The first one is the main lab, which is a containment level 1 facility, hosting the vast majority of our operations. In here, we have a selection of liquid handlers and dispensers, a bioprocessing unit, a couple of safety cabinets, and benching space for molecular biology work. The second room is a small tissue culture facility, which is a containment level 2 facility, which we use for some proof of concept and upstream work, which then feeds back to the main lab. And finally, the last 2 rooms are the washroom and the storeroom with our ULT freezers, the gas system, and most of our consumables and plasticware. Now, the main challenges that we are facing at the moment revolve around sustainability, for sure, and our approach to operations. We are actively working to reduce the impact of our lab operations in terms of carbon footprint, usage of plastic, energy consumption, and we are also looking at ways the quality of our operations through monitoring usage and environmental parameters. But there's obviously a lot of moving pieces, though, so this is not a very easy task.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Francesco.
Yeah, as a follow-up, does this sound familiar, Tobias and Thomas? Does this come across in other companies as well, what Francesco's describing?
Yeah, so I know Francesco quite well in the region. So they are based in London, White City, which is one of the major and fastest growing biotech hubs in the London ecosystem. And we've been working closely with a lot of SME region, and they are all facing similar challenges. And they are also looking to face these challenges by implementing monitoring solutions, by implementing digital management, ELN, inventory solutions to really run the highest productivity, to increase reliability. Especially space is super rare in London. It's expensive. consumables get more expensive, so you really need to look at your productivity and reliability. And I believe small and medium-sized enterprises look at it even more. We see a difference to larger enterprises. I believe what we've seen here, they are a little behind in terms of digital transformation. Most of the large ones are still in implementing the newest electronic lab notebooks, data management solutions to have one source of truth for the experimental data. And then the next steps are managing the equipment resources more efficiently, looking at monitoring to temperature monitoring, incubator monitoring. That's what we've seen on our side.
Yeah, so we from Eppendorf, so our footprint is really big in academia, and so we always see the difference also between academia and industrial customers. So starting from academia, such a role like a lab manager mostly appears in larger institutions or in core facilities, for example, microscopy units or sequencing units. But in the end, also the trend for digitalization also now enters academia. So the small labs on a small scale, they start with implementing a booking solution, an online booking solution, or introducing an ELN to just on a small scale, on a small level, document their experiments on a more standardized and more efficient way than with the normal paper-based lab notebooks that we normally use. And for industry, I mean, I can just completely agree with what Toby said. So from small startups to medium-sized companies to even big pharma, all of these are tackling also currently the lab digitalization, different levels on different scales, but stuff like ELNs, LIMS, automated documentation systems, experimental execution systems, all that is now really, really hitting the field and is really a driving force also now for innovation, also from our side, from Eppendorf, and also from other companies like Customarket, for example. All right, then Francesco, one question from my side is, so in general, why did you decide to go digital with your lab, or what were the key decision drivers that you took that made you introduce digital tools in your lab at Synthase?
Yeah, there's definitely more than one. I'll give you a couple. The main one was to, like I mentioned previously, achieve better sustainability and improved operations. One of the many things that we need at the moment is a more efficient and granular view of how we use our lab space. So this includes being able to track changes in temperature, pressure, humidity, and light, as they might affect the quality of our experiments. And of course, having a booking system that allows us to track us usage of all of our equipment, as well as its training, servicing, and maintenance records is a great tool to have.
I'm curious to find out, is this something that is brought up by researchers or lab management, or is this something that is strategic priorities from the executive level, and that is going to be a top-down decision? Because that's also linked into the hurdles, right? What are the main hurdles to have something like this implemented?
Yeah, there's definitely different ways that you can go about implementing this. In our case specifically, it wasn't very much of a top-down decision. It was more about, as this was actually one of the very projects that I worked on when I first joined Synthase. We were looking at a solution that would do just that, and this just came from the lab users, because the system that we were using at the time was not fit for purpose, and so we had to find a solution that would give us those features. So yeah, that's what worked for us, and obviously, and we're probably gonna get the chance to talk a bit more about that. This is one of the key things that I've learned when phasing in new software and new platforms. The user experience and the list of requirements that the users have for a particular tool are, key in the conversation.
Right. So
and I've seen you speak. Sorry, Thomas, you go ahead.
Just another question. So, did you before you started to go digital in a lab, did you had any structure in mind, any setup in mind that you would like to achieve in Synthase, or did you rather thought in a stepwise manner? So first we implement, for example, a booking system or a documentation system, and then step by step we grow this setup further.
We already had a number of tools that we were using at the time, but we didn't really have a booking system per se. I mentioned that we have a relatively modest lab setup, and our lab team is also not very big. I think it's about a dozen users nowadays. So because of that, it can be very easy to resort to like a quick fix for something like a booking system. But as you're scaling up the space and you're scaling up the team, it becomes, way less sustainable in the mid to long term. And so finding a way that you can account for that is quite important in my opinion.
And I've seen you're working with other companies also quite closely, for example, higher stakes, etc. Do you get insights into these companies as well, if they are facing similar hurdles, or if they even get inspired by your lab setup?
We do sometimes, depending on the company. I think every company, and especially every startup and biotech that we have the chance to work with, has a wildly different setup. And especially if you're ramping up the conversation to the larger companies in the biopharma space, what you will find sometimes is that the tech stack can change quite rapidly, and some of those platforms and softwares might be proprietary. And so users and the company as a whole might be reluctant to move away from specific platforms and softwares just because they spent so much time and efforts and energies and money developing them. I've definitely had a few conversations with other biotechs and startups in this space, and yeah, we've been just sort of like trading ideas on what the best platform for what particular application might be. And I think it's vital to have those conversations because, we might not know about something and they might not know about something. So when we share our knowledge, it's always, everybody wins.
All right, so I mean, just hanging on that. So, in your opinion, also, let's say sharing of information and best practices between groups is also essential for just having a digital framework that everybody is adapting to.
Yeah, for sure.
So within Synthase, just also from my experience when I talk to customers for Visualize Lab Suite, what we partially come across when we talk to customers is that they also have, or basically they want to adopt a software solution or a digital solution, and that's not an issue. But then they face more like institutional issues, like IT prerequisites have to be met, the IT department has to be involved, and responsibilities and everything is not 100% clear there. So did you also had something like that when you started to implement Cluster Market or Visionize in your lab?
Not really. I have to say the whole process was relatively smooth. I was basically given free rein, other than finding a solution that was fit for purpose. In the case of Cluster Market, it didn't really take us that much at all to adopt it, because I was already familiar with the platform as I saw it in action when I was working in academia during the pandemic. And at the time, it looked a lot easier to use than what we were using, without necessarily having to compromise on features. So when I joined Synthase and we were looking for a booking system solution, it was a very quick decision to make. And the reception from the lab team, like I mentioned already, was quite good. Not just because they are an amazing team, shout out to them, but also because there was a real need for such a system. So phasing it in didn't take very long at all.
Okay, so the adoption within the team was really, really well perceived, I would say. Well, did I get it correctly? And also, lucky you also did not have to really, as I understood it correctly, you also don't have to deal with your managers to convince them. This is also something that we partially face, that basically the lab itself is fine, but then the overarching manager needs a bit more of conversation, discussions.
Yeah, but I'll say this: it's I mean, it's much easier in smaller organizations, of course.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and so Cluster Market is a software. Sorry, German. Sorry.
I just wanted to ask Francesco if there are different stakeholders involved in the decision making. Is it procurement? Is it IT? That's what we see at other companies, especially larger ones normally, that there are different departments involved in decision making, which can lead to quite a lot of challenges and especially headaches for the lab manager.
Yeah, in our case, obviously we liaise with our finance team for the procurement side of things. The main point of contact for these initiatives and these projects is me. But yeah, we liaise with finance, and then we also have to liaise with. We have a small IT team that looks after our space, but for them it's more about the case of assisting us and helping us, and not being a hindrance when it comes to these things. It's everyone is on the same page that these things, when all of the end users are on the same page, everyone agrees that this needs to carry on, and so we just go ahead with the project, and that's it. So we try to keep the main focus of these initiatives is the end user, the lab user, working with these platforms. So long as their needs are met and the platforms are fit for purpose, then it's green light.
All right, then. So besides using Cluster Market as a booking solution and lab management solution in your company, you also recently started to use our Visionize Sense environmental monitors and also take advantage of the integration between the Visionize Sense system and Cluster Market. So in contrast to Cluster Market, which is web-based software, our Sensors also is kind of an IT hardware component. So in the end, there had to be some kind of installation going on in your lab. So could you just describe how you experienced that and how much effort from your side as a customer, as a user, it was also to get the system up and running? And
yeah,
just elaborate a bit.
Yeah. So I mean, the installation was incredibly quick and went very, very smoothly. Tobias and Thomas, the spoiler, you were both there, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the whole process took maybe less than an hour. We installed 4 environmental sensors and 1 equipment specific sensor in one of our tissue culture centrifuges, along with 1 router for each of the rooms. And after that, I believe we had to have another session to do the sensor blacklisting on the routers to avoid the sensor reporting to both at the same time. But I think this was carried out on Zoom, and it only took about 15 minutes, 5 of which I spent scouring the lab trying to find a cable that I could use for that. So.
Cool. So, and could you just also describe a bit more for which use cases you use our environmental monitors, and especially also the integration into Cluster Market?
Yeah, so I think the main type of data that we're looking for at the moment from a facility standpoint are temperature and humidity. And the reason why I believe these are the most important parameters is that we need to monitor them, as they can not only influence the user experience, but potentially also have an impact on the quality and reliability of our experiments. We actually had an instance a few months ago where one of our air conditioning units in the lab was not working effectively, and so we didn't have any experiments running at the time, but if we had, then we would have needed that sort of information and data points to be able to understand what happened and how long that happened for, etc. And the way that we are using the data at the moment is simply for documentation purposes, but our R&D team might also be interested in using these sensors to inform their decision and testing further down the line.
All right, so the data is collected for documentation, but also might be involved for R&D purposes, and then finally also decision making.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
So Tobias,
I think
in addition to that, do you guys have any other use cases beyond the ones that Francesco noted here for integrating the cluster market and Visionized Lab suite and customers? Like, what kind of monitoring data do they want to document?
I think it's also different again between small, medium, and large enterprises, and also different to academia. If we look at the monitor, what I've seen here on the SME side, they're very interested in monitoring the freezers, which is quite a standard and the most straightforward one. And we've seen a large demand on the incubator side, monitoring incubator, especially including CO2 percentages. That's very often, and then followed by room monitoring, workspace monitors into your laminar flow hoods or fume hoods and handlers. That's what I really like at Francesco's lab. We put in everything to see really what is the environment you do the experiment in. On the equipment booking and management side, we see on the small, medium-sized enterprise mostly the interest in coordinating the reservations, because you have a smaller equipment fleet, a larger amount of people. You look into maintenance activities. You want to give your researchers all the information they need before they are planning the experiment. So when was the last maintenance? When is the next one? You look into the training status. Are your teams trained in the right way to avoid breakdowns, unauthorized access? Enterprise sites, they are mostly using the equipment solution for creating transparency, because you have a large equipment fleet and there's less transparency. Most project teams do not know what is available at all in the building. And the lab management team has no insights into creation of instruments. So there was a study from Agilent where they said just 4% of lab management or lab ops have access to relevant utilization information to make smarter decisions on procurement, decommissioning, service and maintenance contracts, or placement of equipment. So I think there's a huge potential in equipping these teams, so the lab operations teams, with the right information. Long answer to a short question, but I hope I answered it. An academic is a different story, but I think leave that out for today.
Yeah, maybe I can just add one or two more.
Yeah.
I can just add on to everything that Toby said. So completely agree also from our side. Maybe also just some more, let's say, exotic use cases for the sensors and also the booking solution. So we have a customer from Austria who's working with alpine climates and plant growth, insect growth. So they're using our sensors and also the booking system because they have climate chambers that mimic the alpine climate. And they put our sensors in there to just check temperature, humidity, and also light level, and also use the booking system cluster market to just see if they plan an experiment, whether the equipment is free. And another one is also a plant science company in Oxford in the UK. They use the sensors to not directly monitor the growth chambers, but basically to check within the growth chambers. They had light bulbs. These light bulbs have to have a certain light intensity. And they started to use our sensors to just check whether the light bulbs are going to an end. So then the light intensity goes down, and then they can use that to basically replace the light bulbs before they had an issue with their growth chambers. Okay, so after talking about all these... Sorry, Toby, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, I believe you all know the horror stories about freezer outages. So we did one competition where we collected stories from our users. One PhD student collecting samples in, I don't know the English word, Kyglaven, in the middle of nowhere. For 3 years, a specific sample size around plants. She came back, put it in the freezer outage, all samples gone, and then 3 kind of gone. So there are a couple of hours. If you Google freezer stories, I think it's quite horror stories.
Definitely.
Just
So I mean,
yeah.
So now we talked a lot about what digitalization basically can offer to a lab, but also just to make the circle round. So in the end, Francesco, if you could just somehow explain or just bring up some stories on how you manage your lab, or how was your lab work or your all-day lab routine before you started using Cluster Market or any other software tool in the lab. So just give some examples on how you manage your lab then.
Yeah. So when I first joined, and we didn't have Cluster Market or the Eppendorf sensors in place, we would just use a simple calendar booking system, and we were not monitoring environmental or equipment specific parameters other than having a system to monitor our cold storage solutions. So all of the fridges, the freezers, and the -80s. And everything else was just managed either using folders and spreadsheets on cloud storage or through an ELN that we were using at the time. So some solutions were already in place. Some others we moved away from in the meantime, and some others we adopted, including Custom Market and the Eppendorf sensors. So the landscape of our lab has been changing quite a bit over the past couple of years, and me personally, I have no intention to stop. I have a I have a pipeline and a timeline in mind for when and what I would like to phase in at some point. Obviously, I have regular conversations with the lab users. Since I joined about 6 months ago, we had a couple of associate scientists joining the team, and part of the role has also been to support me in the day-to-day running of the lab. So they basically became my sustainability champions and lab of the future champions to have these conversations with. Um, so yeah, that's how we went about solving this issue at the time. Um, I We didn't really have any conflicts or problems at the time because everyone was on the same page as to what solution we had to go for. But yeah, like I mentioned previously, just talk to your users.
Yeah, so you would really say that also the working culture and also the always frame digital mindset is also important. So to really get this rolling in a lab.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it does help that we are a software company, so everyone is quite passionate about tech. Definitely not something you can take for granted, but even if we're talking about like a lab in academia or in any other company, biotech or otherwise, the conversations are quite similar. I think if you can show the value of adopting new platforms. If there's one thing that I've learned is that, being a scientist by training myself, scientists love data. So if you show them the data and you show them the value of what you want to, they listen.
And what I really like about your team, Francesco, you, Daniel, and the rest are very active on LinkedIn, etc., showing new setups for lab automation, new sensor installations. Do you also sometimes get feedback? Because I see the engagement on your posts, etc. is super. I believe you have an influence on lab managers from other biotech or even pharma companies to see, hey, it's possible. It's not rocket science. It's already available and not something that's complete out of space. Do you get positive feedback, I guess?
Yeah, I do. We do. I mean, Daniel, whom you mentioned, is our our LinkedIn star, the influencer. He's regularly posting about automation and new technologies that us at Synthase work on and collaborate with. And from my side, I regularly post about sustainability and lab of the future platforms and technologies. And yeah, I do have regular conversations with our lab managers in the space. I know quite a good bunch from London and around London, and other people that I've met as I was working in the Netherlands and Germany back in the day. Yeah, I mean, sometimes the conversation is everyone is on the same page, and we might be using different softwares to address the same and to tackle the same issues. Sometimes I might not know that there's a software that just does things better, and by talking to one of my peers, we can figure it out together. And sometimes it's more like detective work that we all have to pitch in for. So we're both looking for a solution, and we haven't been able to identify it. And so I think keeping that networking and those conversations going is essential. And like you mentioned, none of this is rocket science. You don't need to, turn your lab into the vision for the lab of the future tomorrow. It's definitely not an overnight process, but you got to start small. But if you never start, you never you never finish.
Do you actually have a few conferences that you can recommend to the audience where a lot of lab and exchange experiences, new ideas, etc.? Do you have some in mind?
I think the actual the poster child Lab of the Future conference in Amsterdam that I went to last year was incredibly good. I found myself getting out of some presentations with my head steaming from all of the information overload that that I suffer from. But it was all very informative and very useful. I've definitely learned a lot and expanded on my knowledge on a number of topics, not just new platforms and new technologies, just specific bits of software. Case studies, lots of case studies on how specific labs went about achieving and troubleshooting a specific issue and working on specific projects. And also some sustainability stuff. I think there was an incredible presentation from Penny from AstraZeneca showcasing their larger projects on sustainability. And so, yeah, I think overall that was personally speaking, the right mix of topics and type of presentations that I was looking for. And I think there was recently one in Basel. I think it was Future Labs, but I didn't have the chance to go to that. I just heard about it, and I got really good feedback from one of my lab manager friends that was there at the time, and he said it was really, really good as well.
Yeah, I think these two conferences are also the ones that I come across quite often. And we met at Lab of the Future last year in Amsterdam, and I know it's this year again. And I went to the one in Boston. And
So I myself also joined Future Labs Live in Basel last week, and I can just once again just agree with Toby. So it's really worthwhile also joining to these. So as a representative from industry, but also as a lab manager, really go out and join these conferences. Just take a look, join these seminars, presentations. I mean, they all of these big companies, but also some of the really small startups that are just in the beginning of their journey. They really share a lot of information and also a lot of do's and don'ts, and also just give some more thoughts in your brain that you can use in your all-day lab work or also in your institution to do it. And I would say, I mean, since Francesco already teased it on that he's also quite active on LinkedIn and together with David. I mean, with your experience and also with your experience from your all-day lab work, could you give our audience some, let's say, top 5 list of do's and don'ts or key hurdles, or just some recommendations on how you went through your digital journey and just inspire them?
Yeah, I think one of the key hurdles when trying to phase in new things is obviously change management. And I'm being extremely generic using the word things on purpose because this applies to any change, whether it's health and safety, operations, policies, platforms, software, and so on. I think being able to influence and keep the communication going is key. And like I mentioned previously, scientists love data. So if you show them the value and the data behind whatever it is that you want them to adopt, that will go a long way. And the other thing that I've learned for sure is that there's a lot of value in operational data. Which is in itself a potentially valuable asset. All of the processes and the way that we go about managing the lab space can really make or break the experience. And the other thing that I mentioned previously as well, keep in mind that this is really not an overnight process. I think if there was another thing that I would recommend is to create a list of things that you would want to change and streamline. Maybe draw a map of what the experience of working in the lab looks like, focusing on the use cases and features that you would like to see. But remember to include your lab users in the conversation. Then create a timeline of when and how you would like things to look like. You're probably going to have to update it along the way, but most importantly, you have to start small. You don't have to focus on huge projects straight off the bat. Unless there's anything critical, things might not be running in the best possible way, but they are working and they are running. So don't let this project overwhelm you. And obviously, any actions for quick wins will give you more confidence and help you gain momentum, and can also be used to support your future projects and initiatives.
Well, thank you, Francesco, for sharing that. And you just teased a couple of minutes ago that you already have a roadmap and a timeline on how you want to continue with digitalization in your lab. I mean, could you just give us some insights or some hints what you plan?
I can share what our next step is likely going to be. We're currently in the market to identify a solution for inventory management. Like I mentioned previously, because the setup and the lab team are relatively small, the way that we normally and we usually go about it is either through, it's a mixture of features with our ELN and some documents and data that we have on other platforms such as Notion and Google Drive cloud solutions. But having one single one-stop solution that would allow us to monitor everything and keep track of everything in one solution would be best. So yeah, this is definitely what I'm currently working on.
Cool, thank you, Francesco.
Can't wait to see the results then.
Yeah.
I think
Maybe we can have like a retro conversation after it's all done and dusted.
Yeah. And I think that's a complete separate project, right? Inventory, and there are so many approaches how to make this as efficient as possible. Is it based on weight sensors in your stock rooms? Is it based on RFID tags? So as you said, I think that was a very good advice. what works, what can be improved, what does not work at all, and then working small steps, quick wins, having a long-term strategy, but it's not an overnight project. But it's also not rocket science, as I said. So everything is out there.
Yeah, definitely. And also very important is just communicate everything that you're doing, keep everybody on board, and also make sure that, digitalization is not only a technical change, it's also some kind of a working together culture change. And you just have to keep everybody on board, everybody informed, and also explain why you're doing certain steps. And then normally after a certain period of time, people adapt to it. And then also the entire project will grow, develop, and in the end also be successful. Okay, then I would say thank you, Francesco, for joining us, sharing all your valuable insights and also your experiences. It was really a blast talking to you. Also, Toby, thank you for joining. And should do this more often then.
Yes.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Thank you, Francesco.
Next time in the pub in London, please.
Of course.
Agreed.
Thank you, Tobias,
Yep,
and thank you,
thanks.
Thomas,
Yep,
for such
thanks
an
for having me.
informative discussion. It was great to learn so much about digitalization in the modern lab. Now, to learn more about Synthase, digital experiment platform that lets you design powerful experiments, run them in your lab, then automatically build structured data with no code necessary, visit synthase.com and request a demo. To learn more about Cluster Market and their easy-to-use laboratory equipment scheduling and management system, visit clustermarket.com, where you can start your demo today. And to learn more about Visionize and the Eppendorf digitalization future, visit eppendorf.com/visionize. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next broadcast on June 13th. Learn all about essentials in exome production using ultracentrifuges. We will discuss production of high-quality exomes and focus on separation by means of ultracentrifugation as a gold standard in the field to further streamline your workflow. If you missed out on any portion of this broadcast or have any of our other past events, you can also view all of our previous episodes on demand at eppendorf.com/lab channel. Watch them all on your own time and use the links to contact the experts with any questions, comments, or reactions. On behalf of Francesco, Tobias, Thomas, and everyone else at Eppendorf Lab Channel, thank you for taking the time to join us, and until we see you again, stay safe and have a wonderful day.